microphone and, oop, hello?
You're on.
Wow, I think I'm on now, right?
Did we pass our reports?
Huh? No, we're still coming up to that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry.
See, I have the score sheet, so I know what's going on.
Sorry about that.
Public comment. Now is the time of the evening where anybody from the public may come up to the podium and share your thoughts with us, as long as it's not on the agenda. Items on the agenda will be heard at a later time. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Connie Henry, or Dr. Henry. I live at 1111 Merrill. I've been a resident since 2003, and my child attended the Winnetka Public Schools from K through 8. I'd like to comment on the school district referendum and why I think its approval would not be good for the long-term health of the village.
Excuse me, that's one thing we can't entertain any sort of campaigning or politicking on political issues during public comment. I'm sorry.
I comment that it's not good for the long-term health of the village.
I understand that. But we can't entertain those comments in our public session because they're considered campaigning or politicking. She snuck it in before I realized what she was saying. Is that correct, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, it is actually a state statute that no public funds can be used to advocate for either a candidate or a referendum position, and providing the forum and the lights and the cameras for advocating is
Okay.
considered.
Can I just advocate that maybe you guys should coordinate sort of tax
Sure.
increases across the various taxing bodies? I think the school district is getting a little out of hand in their greed or attempt to take up so much of our taxes. I mean, even in the annual report that you came out in 2019, you show that they've had the biggest growth in taxes over 10 years. They take the largest percent of our taxes. You know, my basically point tonight is to say that it would be very nice for the tax holders if you guys did some coordination about what the actual needs of the village are, as opposed to just wants, because there probably are a lot of things on the plates, like infrastructure and things like that, and it would be better to take care of a sort of a priority of needs for the village, instead of just letting one of the taxing bodies sort of take up all the taxes in the village.
That's a good point, and you know, it's interesting because I've had that thought for a long period of time, and it's been brought to me by numerous residents, and there's actually been a lot of attempts by the village, I think particularly, to reach out to other taxing bodies and try to enter into that sort of coordination. And it's interesting when you get into these governmental conversations. I mean, I'm just a resident like you are, right? And it is really interesting how siloed thinking is in organizations based on their own budgets, their own taxing, ability, and how much of the pie they get. Now, obviously, as the village, we always promote the fact that, we have the smallest handout, and that only 12.56% of your tax bill actually goes to village services, which we're really proud of. But with respect to the other bodies, it's not as easy as one may think, even though it is for the public good and it's promoted as such, because, I think everybody just has this attitude that they have to protect what they already have. It's frustrating. We'll keep doing it, and I think you'll be pleased to see that in the coming month and a half maybe, we'll be able to put on display here in this room some examples of intergovernmental cooperation that do benefit the entire community. So it works on some levels, but it's not as easy as you would think, and thanks for reminding us of that.
Well, thank you very much.
And I'm sorry, I've never seen you in the room, and the first time you come in, I got to shut you down, so I apologize for that. Anyone else like to address council? Seeing none, I will close the public comment session, and we'll move forward with reports. Trustees, we'll start down with Penny. Penny, you have a report? No. Scott?
No report.
Bob?
No report.
Ann? No. John, you were really anxious. So you must have one.
I just want to thank the Winnetka Police Department. They sent the representatives to McHenry County Deputy Sheriff Jacob Keltner's funeral last week. Probably very few of you people know prior to moving to Winnetka, I lived in McHenry for 16 years, and my current offices are in McHenry County. So I just want to say thanks. It was nice.
Great.
Thanks.
Well, thanks, John. Village Attorney?
No report tonight.
Village Manager?
No report.
Village President? I don't have a report, but I did want to share something with the group and with the audience as well, because I think, you know, from time to time, people will come up to me and ask me about our public utility, our electrical plant, and, you know, why don't we shut that thing down? It's, you know, it sits there on the lakefront, it's occupying land that could be used for other uses, you know, and they don't understand the economics of actually what, the economics and the independence that is provided to this community by operating our own electric utility. So, you know, every once in a while I come across something that reinforces, at least in my mind, why we continue to be on the right track and why it is so important for us to be able to control our destiny in the realm of public power provision. So yesterday the mail comes, and even though I'm not a big fan of cranes, most of the time I really don't care what they have to say, but you know, it's a gossip rag, and it is. I mean, they pretend much of this stuff is news.
That's
and
an individual
right.
comment, not a group comment.
I'm representing the village of Winnetka.
No, I'm not. I'm representing my own views. That's why it's the president's report. So anyway, yesterday this showed up, and I was sitting over lunch, and on the front page, the headline is, "This new electricity bill could zap you." And I'll just read a couple excerpts from it because I think it reinforces why we should be steadfast in maintaining our power plants and our public utility in general. I don't have my glasses, so please bear with me. ComEd wants Springfield to force you into a 13-year bet on interest rates. The House Public Utilities Committee on March 12th approved a bill extending Commonwealth Edison's authority to set the rate. Oh boy, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses. Yeah, please, thank you. We'll be here all night otherwise. To set its rates via an annual formula. Apparently, given the 18-0 vote, no one on that panel thought it was a matter deserving much scrutiny. But what those lawmakers voted to do, perhaps without understanding it, was subject all 4 million of ComEd's captive power delivery customers in northern Illinois to unhedged interest rate risk for the next 13 years. As it stands, the formula expires in 2023. The bill would continue it until 2032. And this is the part I found interesting. Let me make sure I got it so I can do a quick slip. Okay. It would be as if a bank were to issue you a 15-year mortgage at a fixed rate, then fail to hedge its interest rate risk. No bank in the world would do that. Why should the rates Illinoisans pay for electricity embed that kind of exposure? And it goes on, blah, blah, blah. So for regulators, the formula takes away the most important tool they have to keep rates affordable, which is determining what the utilities' return should be. Now, for those of you who don't know much about the utility structure here in Winnetka, is every year Mr. Keyes comes along with a budget that's based on our actual cost of purchasing power and the actual cost of providing power, and then we factor into that some maintenance factors for our local power grid, along with some other operational means and some long-term investment for capital improvements, which we'll be talking about a little bit later this evening. It's vetted by the people of this community. We all sit around and scrutinize Brian's budgets. We look it over and make sure that it is giving the people of this community the best possible deal that they could get on power out there in the purchasing world of power. And Brian does an awesome job with his participation in IMEA to ensure that we keep our rates really competitive, at least on a par, if not better, than Commonwealth Edison. The most important thing is we don't get exposed to this sort of shenanigans. and we will never be exposed to this sort of shenanigans as long as you have 7 people sitting up here at the table scrutinizing this on an annual basis. So I guess to those people who always ask me, why do we have our own power plant and why don't we get rid of it, anybody who'll take the time to read the entire article in Cranes will start to get an understanding of how important, especially in today's environment, it is to be able to maintain control over the fundamental resources to operate our homes and have the lights on and all sorts of other good stuff that the Winnetka power plants and the utility provides for us. So now I'll get off my soapbox and we'll move on. Thank you. Item 6, approval of the agenda. Does any trustee wish to remove an item on the consent agenda for a separate vote? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the final form of the agenda?
Second.
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7, consent agenda. I'll ask the village clerk to read the items on the consent agenda.
Approval of Village Council meeting minutes for March 5th, 2019 regular meeting. Approval of the warrant list dated March 1st through the 14th, 2019 in the amount of $678,207.57, and approval of the annual outdoor seating permits.
Thanks, Rob. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda by omnibus vote?
So moved.
Roll call vote?
Trustee Myers?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn?
Yes.
Trustee Wedner? Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
Trustee Lampier?
Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 8, ordinances and resolutions. 8A, public hearing, zoning amendments. Code amendments for proposed banquet facility at 915 Green Bay Road to be continued to April 16th. A public hearing was scheduled for tonight to discuss a zoning ordinance amendment pertaining to banquet facilities in the C2 Commercial Retail District and overlay. The applicant has requested a continuance of the public hearing while negotiations continue with the property owner of the proposed banquet space. The hearing on the proposed zoning ordinance text amendment is now open. Peter Friedman, our village attorney, will summarize.
Well, I think we're just going to continue this to the next April 16th. So by doing it in an open session, we don't need to renotice and republish the public hearing notice.
Very good. Is there anything else I need to do under this, Peter?
Nothing else you need to do.
Do we need to have a vote to continue it?
No, it's been noticed on the agenda as being continued to the April 16th.
So this item will be open and be floating out there in the ether for the next month. So,
Less than a month.
less than a month. Thank you. Public hearing zoning amendments. Ordinance number MC1 2019, Commercial District Zoning Ordinance Amendments. Pursuant discussion at 4 previous council meetings, a public hearing has been advertised for this evening to hear public input on proposed zoning ordinance amendments pertaining to the C2 Retail Commercial District and overlay. The public hearing on the proposed commercial district zoning ordinance amendments is now open. And our Director of Community Development, David Schoen, will summarize this.
Good evening. First, I would note that on the dais, you received some additional written correspondence from members of the public, so just wanted to point that out. And for the members of the public, the Village Council has been studying this issue for a year in study session format, and at your last meeting on January 15th, you directed staff to prepare an ordinance for your consideration and public input, which is what we're doing this evening. So tonight, I'm going to quickly go over the proposed changes in these 6 areas. I would just note, since the council last reviewed proposed language, staff has worked with the village attorney to place the amendments in an ordinance format. And during that process, the village attorney has tweaked some of the language, such as refining proposed land use definitions so that they're a little more consistent with land use regulation-based terminology. So I just wanted to note that. So in terms of minor changes for readability, at your last meeting, we presented some of these ideas, or all of these ideas, in terms of putting similar compatible uses into one category, and then also updating some terminology in terms of to be more reflective of businesses that we would see today. And those are two examples up on the screen. Also, we reviewed with the council some new definitions. Some of these definitions are for existing uses, and others are new uses that the council identified as wanting to allow, or they may be maybe spinned off another use. So for instance, personal fitness studios is basically a small fitness facility under 2,500 square feet, while before we had just one category, health club, and now health club is those over 2,500 square feet. So before you is a set of definitions related to these uses. In addition, the council discussed making changes to the overlay district boundaries. We discussed this issue most recently in January. In the end, after discussing many possibilities, the council identified these three areas, one in Elm Street Business District, which is the former Savoci Glass building, and then in Hubbard Woods, those portions of the property more than 50 feet back from Green Bay Road. And so on Techney, it's a small portion. Currently, that space is occupied by Girlfriends and North Shore Shoe Clinic. That's on the west side of Green Bay on Tower. And then on the east side, part of the gas station at that location, that portion again, 50 feet set back from Green Bay Road, would be removed from the overlay district. In addition, during the council's discussion, the council looked at reclassifying some permitted uses to special uses, and these are listed here. The council identified them as uses that may be competing for space with retailers and restaurants, and that we should look at them more on a case-by-case basis rather than allowing them by right. So for the public's information, moving it from a permitted use to a special use means that they would have to go through a public hearing process before the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission would forward a recommendation to the Village Council, and then the council would make the final decision whether it would be appropriate to allow that particular land use in a specific space. I should note that existing businesses that fall within one of these land use categories would be allowed to continue to operate in its existing space without needing to seek any sort of special use approval. If one of these uses, for instance, wanted to expand in a neighboring space, that would require special use approval, or if they wanted to relocate in another area in the that's zoned the overlay district, in that new location, they would need to seek special use approval. In addition, the council identified some land uses that they thought it would be appropriate to allow in the overlay district and then in other districts. And so this table is an excerpt from the table in the staff report showing those new uses and how they would be allowed in the village's 3 commercial districts. I would note that when we talked about it, it was mainly related to the overlay district and the general retail district. We then as staff had to identify whether it needed, how it would be allowed in the C1 district, because it would be a use. And so we have selected in that category whether it's a permitted use, special permit use, or not allowed, based on how the village has treated similar uses in the past. And then lastly, we looked at the special use standards. We discussed those. We have made some revisions, mainly to reword them for clarification's sake, not creating new standards. The first standard in summary up there is to look at, we don't want non-retail uses to dominate a street frontage. The second one is if there's a special use that has multi-use areas, such as it may have a retail display area, it may have private offices, it may have an employee work area, that the retail area needs to be up along the street, and that's what we'll be looking for rather than an office up along the street. And then the last one we worked on rewording was that if it's a new building, we're looking for a design that can accommodate retail uses along the street frontage. So in summary tonight, it's the public hearing to hear from the public and for the council to consider introduction. I would note right now, as the ordinance is worded, that the ordinance would go into effect immediately upon its passage and publication. We haven't set some date out into the future. If the council would be interested in that, that would need to be a change you would need to make. But we set it up as a standard ordinance that would be adopted upon its passage and publication. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for David? I want to go to public comment before we have any conversation, though. Questions?
I just have some details about language, but we should probably just say that for the conversation
Okay.
later. Yeah, okay.
So that being said, anybody else? Got that? No? Okay. We'll go right ahead and move to public comment on this. Are there anybody in the audience who would like to speak on this item? I guess not. So that being said, we'll bring it back up, and now we can talk. And Penny, now you can have at it.
All right, there we go.
David, I think you'll probably be at the podium for this.
There we go. First of all, thank you. I know this is definitely a work in progress. I did have a clarification. I know we talked about the special use process just in general. That's a different discussion for a different time, right? Okay, yeah. Sorry, I lost my spot. As we go through to make our special use standards more clear, looking on agenda packet, page 17, which is 5 of that particular portion of the agenda. Point number 3, the proposed special use at the proposed location will provide for display windows, facade, signage, and lighting similar in nature and compatible with that provided by retail uses. I think this is one area where we've really fallen down and we haven't been able to make really any good inroads into having the kind of window displays in some of the special uses that we were envisioning. So I don't know whether this particular component, we need to do some more work with the design review board or what we need to do, but this for me is a major disappointment, I think, in our commercial areas, and I'd like to figure out how we can make it work better for the community as well as for the particular tenants if we approve it.
Just on that point, is that an issue with the language on point 3, or is it an issue of our willingness to enforce the language?
Or is it something that would be really more in the design review board's purview and we need to do something more with them? I don't know the answer to the question.
Well, I think what we're trying to do here is establish standards. I think we can delegate
Right.
that the design review board, that if a problem is brought to our attention, we can either address it or delegate it to the design review board.
But I really would like to have some sort of teeth in this that it can be more meaningful.
And many times, the project does not necessarily have to go to design review board. If you're opening a restaurant, if you're not doing any exterior changes, it doesn't go to the review board. So anything beyond inside the face of the window really also is not design review board's responsibility.
So, but we do have design standards, both in terms of what kinds of signs can't be put in windows, as well as, the types of windows and so forth. So I'm wondering, is there anything, I mean, is that legally, is that okay, or is that within our purview? How would we go about best addressing that?
Could I make a suggestion that somewhere at the appropriate place in the ordinance, there is a statement that says if it is brought to the attention of the village, or if the village sees an issue, that the council can direct the design review board to define remediation activities that would then be presented back to the council.
I think really what we're looking for is a notice, a cure, and a penalty period, really.
Right.
Because I think that's,
Right.
I mean, when you start sending something that's an existing condition back to a board for administrative review, I think we're missing the point of actual
Right.
enforcement, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
maybe there's, I don't know, Peter, this is way out of my wheelhouse, but am I on the right track? That, there should be something in here that says that, upon notice by the village of failure to comply with these requirements, that there's some cure period, 30 days, 60 days, whatever it is, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah. Are you suggesting, Chris, though, that then we just put it back on the building owner, hey, it's a problem, come back with a solution?
Fix it. I mean, it's
Well,
not even.
fix it to what
I mean, isn't
standard?
it
That's why I
kind
was
of
saying,
subjective, right? I mean,
does the design review board,
I mean, I think what Trustee Myers was saying, and if that's the direction, is that we need to pay more attention to this as it goes through the process, as the Plan Commission reviews the request in terms of what exactly is your window going to look like? What will we see? And the main issue is how is it going to interact with the street, right?
Right, exactly,
It's
exactly. We
not-
want active use.
It's
right.
what's going on inside
Right,
the
right,
space.
right.
So it kind of gets to what we were talking about, I was mentioning earlier in terms of, we want the retail display area there, not your office.
Right.
Your personal office
Exactly.
there. But and so as we go through the process, because if we don't have a condition that may identify what we're looking for in
Right.
their display window,
Right.
then I don't know, it would be difficult to enforce this general language. So what I'm hearing is there's an interest in, as it goes through the process, and as staff works with applicants, and as we work with the Plan Commission and the council, we all pay attention that if this is an issue, that we need to lay out some parameters. For this particular use, this may be appropriate. For this other use, where you're at, it's okay that it's not a full display window because you're on the very, whatever, but I think on a case-by-case basis, we can evaluate these and look at what's appropriate in that circumstance in terms of how this storefront is interacting with the other retailers along the street.
And I think particularly over the last year or two, we have granted a number of special uses, particularly to dental arts and medical offices. And I think we actually have some pretty good examples of what I think, to our minds, work and what doesn't work. So it may, we may be able to use just examples from what we have going right now, because there's some very interactive window spaces which, work, and then some which are really blank. So thank you.
And maybe instead of just calling it a display window, maybe add the word active window.
Yeah.
I mean-
Whatever the front,
It doesn't have to be a display box,
right.
but something active in the window that helps you
Gotcha.
realize there's something there.
I'm going to throw this out. I'm a little uncomfortable with that because I feel like, there are some retail concepts in other places like downtown where the display window is just a white wall and it's a retail store. When you walk in, it's meant to make sort of a surprise and privacy for people who are shopping there. And I know what our intention is of creating a vital community, and so we want it not to feel empty. But I think part of the issue that we're suffering with is that our storefronts are empty of anything.
Well, there's
And
certainly.
so,
I'm sorry,
and
Nina.
especially in Hubbard Woods,
Yep.
where some of these have come in. And so, I just am reluctant to say to people who might think about opening a permitted use, something that's in the overlay, that they're going to have, the Winnetka censorship on their window space. What if there's something cool that wants to come to town, but they want to put, curtains in the front or a white wall like there is in the city. I'm just saying, like, you know, what we want is vitality. We want people walking down the street. We want excitement. We want that. You know, dictating window treatments isn't necessarily going to get us what we're looking for.
Well, I think that, you know, if you want to have a window display, you know, for example, Neapolitan, which they have a white wall and they have window displays, you know, I mean, that's okay. And the issue is that we have some where literally there's just a screen comes down, it's a totally dead space. And that for our small commercial district is a real problem. I mean, if we have a number of those, we're going to have a really not a very interesting commercial strip, and I think that's the issue.
Well, I mean, our challenge is to bring in interesting commercial entities, right? I mean, that's our challenge, is to have our business development person bringing in interesting concepts for the village. I mean, vital and interesting concepts. And I think that is the challenge. And worrying about the displays in dental offices at this point where we're at is sort of a distraction from the real problem, which is that there are too many empty storefronts. And
Well,
we need great things to come in there.
I'd like to jump in because two things. A, we're talking about special uses, so we're granting people the right to do something that they normally wouldn't be permitted to do by right. So the trade-off is okay, if you're going to do something that is fundamentally non-retail or not on our list of approved things, you got to give us something in return. You just can't go in there and...
point, right.
And the other issue that we have, and where my concern is enforceability, and I will say I'm really frustrated about this because we have a realtor in town who was granted a special use permit, who has done a half-baked job of making good on their commitments relative to pop-up retail in the front of their store. We have a fitness facility over on Lincoln Avenue that promised us all sorts of really interesting and unique sort of retail-looking display, and you walk by there now and the place looks like a junk heap. So, and the problem is we don't have any enforceability. So my only concern on this is that I think we should have some sort of notice and cure provision that if it's observed that they aren't consistent with, and Peter, you made a good point. Look, when this thing comes through the process, that's where we got to nail it down.
Right.
You know? And so if it's not consistent with the application that was approved,
Right.
then they have a certain period of time to fix it, or they lose their, and we have to be penal about it to a certain degree. They should lose the special use. They should lose their right to be in business because they didn't make good on their commitments, like a certain realtor in town and like a certain fitness provider in town who have not made good on their commitments. And now we got to look at blank storefronts in those situations. So that's my thought on the whole thing.
And I'm fine, I mean, I think that if there are issues, either leaving it up to the retailer to come back with a solution or asking the design review to provide some guidance to the retailer, you know, I'm happy with either one, but I agree. I think there needs to be some kind of teeth behind this that basically says if there is an issue, the council has the authority, and maybe it's up to us. We can direct the design review committee to come up with what the business needs to do if the business can't come up with a solution, or we can just revoke the special use.
And if we go to DRB, though, don't we have to give them additional powers? Because right
No,
now,
they would recommend back to us.
but right now, they have nothing to do with the inside of the store.
No, this would be the display. Oh, I see what
They
you're
don't have
saying.
anything
I
to
see
do
what-
once it
I
gets
see,
inside the
okay.
glass.
Well, that's the issue, then I would say, let's not get into that. That
Yeah,
becomes.
and it's tough. When I say active,
Yeah, yeah.
Ann pointed out Neapolitan, I consider it active.
Yeah, yeah.
The white wall,
Yeah, yeah.
nice
I wasn't
lights,
talking about
great
Neapolitan.
displays.
Right.
And they change it out.
Yeah, right.
So it's all subjective, which is
Yeah.
tough.
Then I would just leave the authority here.
Can I think there's a point that I had a question about that I think dovetails with this, and that is we have all of these regulations and ideas about how we want to change things, and some of them are kind of subtle. And we've had come before, I wasn't involved in the fitness center, and I wasn't involved in the realtor, so I don't have that overhang. And I think the real issue on that is sort of underscored by a woman who came in with a design firm that she had leased out the space, and then she came in ex post facto for a special use permit. And as I've been sitting here, and what struck me as odd about the process was that the landlord could sign the lease with a
That's a great
use that wasn't already approved. And so the thing that strikes me as the challenge in all of this is communicating this to the landlords, right? So that we don't end up with a situation where we're approving something in arrears, right? It's already happened. The horse has left the barn, too late for us to close the door. So I don't see in this stuff as, where is the discussion of how we're going to promote this with the landlords and the owners of those, all of the rentable spaces?
Sure. When we have, as part of this public hearing, have informed all of the property owners. We also sent an email out to our email list of businesses and other interested parties in terms of the proposed changes, so they're aware of them.
But Ann, you're
And
talking
when
about on an
we- when-
ongoing basis.
And when the council, what the council finally adopts, we will then send out what the rules are in terms of the new rules of the 3 commercial districts in terms of uses allowed. And as part of that, we'll include reminding them that certain uses require special use approval and that they need to receive that prior to them occupying the space.
Yeah, I understand that, but what happens if
Right.
someone, a landlord says, oh, don't worry about that, they're not going to do anything, just sign the lease, move in. What right does the village have to close that business until they get the proper zoning?
Or is
Or
there any,
to revoke it completely?
or is there a penalty, that the landlord is responsible
Right.
for?
It's the teeth of the enforcement.
Are you
Right.
saying if somebody is operating an establishment that requires a special use and they don't have one,
We had that happen.
we can close them?
But I think, Ann, what you're saying is, let's say a secondhand store is looking to move into Winnetka, and they're told by the landlord, oh, yeah, this is approved, don't worry, and they move in.
Sign a lease.
The penalty is to the,
Right.
to the business, right? The penalty is not necessarily, there's no penalty on the,
Or the landlord?
It's both. The owner and the user of the property are both liable for zoning code.
Oh, they are.
For building and zoning code violations. We don't let the owner get off the hook just because he has a.
Well, there's a simple way to solve that problem, and that's to just simply ask every business that comes into the town to obtain a simple business license. Just come to community development, $10, you get a business license before you can open your store
I think
up.
that's a good idea.
And then that way, it gives community development a chance to engage them and say, what are you doing there? Well, I'm opening up a design shop, and me and 4 of my designers are going to sit in the back room and whip up plans, right? And then David or Ann or whoever else is down there can say, hey, or Brian, hey, you can't do that there. Simple. It's just a simple way to make sure that people that we have a check-in before the business opens, like the poor woman who came in here.
Right, but it's no different in a zoning thing, because I've been places where no one checks to make sure you get the business license before you open up and sign the lease. So you still have the same problem now, instead of just zoning, now you got zoning and a business license you're missing.
but it helps. I mean, there's no foolproof system. If somebody is blind to all the
Right.
requirements, they're going
Right.
to get stuck.
Don't you
Well,
think
doesn't the
occupancy?
landlord, couldn't you require the landlord to have the business concept approved by the village, this business license, before they can sign a lease?
Well, theoretically, they
That-
have that already. I mean,
Well, I mean, it slipped through the cracks, so.
So our process typically catches this, right? So many times, I would say a clear majority, almost, 90-some% of them will come into community development, and they'll be given guidance either through David's staff or economic development coordinator and say, here's the underlying zoning. If it doesn't fit, here's the relief process, if you're really interested, and here's how it works. We had talked about business licensing a
Right.
few years ago and thought it was another regulatory hurdle. It hasn't been part of our history. There's the issue of, there's a lot of education that goes along with it. It's something that we could do, but it would take some time to ramp up for that. In the case of the design studio, it was one of those that slipped through, but we did catch it, and we did bring it back to be cured. Thankfully, it was a smaller space, but we do catch
Except the
clear majority of
The
it,
cure was just for us to approve it. I mean,
or to say no.
it didn't really feel like we could say no at that point. When someone has
that is
open, and we want to encourage, whatever little bit of commercial activity there is. I mean, I feel like we're beggars can't be choosers, but on the other hand, if that had been caught ahead of the process, then the person who opened the store could have been guided to other parts of the village perhaps,
So there's, there's, as David said, the noticing provisions that would come after the ordinance is approved, and then perhaps annual or semi-annual reminders to the businesses about their underlying zoning would be another way of keeping it current. There aren't that many landlords that we have, I mean, there's plenty, but it's not an unmanageable number of business interests to inform. So that'd be another way of handling it.
And the goal is obviously to keep it easy for the businesses.
That was
Adding
the
another
sense of
layer
why a
doesn't really help.
license wasn't there. But it does help to have the data, because when you have a business license, you can catch other aspects of the business, square footage, things for public safety.
Under what circumstances is an occupancy permit required?
David, it usually on a building permit would be occupancy.
Generally, when, on a building permit or by the building code's definition, a change of use, that's not necessarily zoning use, that's building code use. That you would need, whether you need to make improvements or not, we need to make sure that for that use, the space meets those building code requirements.
It is interesting to me. It seems like it would make a lot of sense if businesses did come in and check in, and just to make sure that all those boxes are ticked off. I mean, I don't know, I guess you're sort of in the hands of the landlord and trusting that they're giving you the right advice, right? I mean, who would be responsible for ensuring that the tenant does all the right things relative to the village? Should be the landlord, right?
And the tenant is responsible for themselves independently to find out the space they are going to lease, whether they can go in the space. So it's both the tenant and landlord's responsibility. They're independent players entering into an agreement. I know they tend to lean on the landlord in terms of what is, that it does comply with zoning, but they should also independently, for their own self-interest, research what uses are allowed in that space.
Does the village,
I agree with that. I mean, everyone has some responsibility in this. I think that we are spending a lot of time talking about the rare exception that comes through. And I do agree that the business in any municipality, Chris, you would know this, and, there are codes in every town, and I think the merchant should know and do a little investigation before they put their name on a lease. That just makes common sense. So, I mean, personally, I don't think this is, you made a point, it's special use. If someone came in and said, gee, we have this great concept and we have a white wall and we have nice lighting in front of it, we might say, terrific, special use, we'll grant it. So I think these are all reasonable, and everyone should, go in eyes wide open when they go into a lease.
does the village currently have like a list of tenant owners, emergency contact information and things like that? Because that's usually where the business license comes through. Just to know if something happens there, who to
I believe the
contact.
fire department gathers some of that in their regular inspections.
Okay.
Can I?
So are
can I
we-
just?
Go ahead,
sorry, I was just going to say, can I just suggest? I mean, I think we all agree that there needs to be some teeth in the enforcement on point number 3. I think this issue of the business license requires a little bit more conversation, which we probably aren't going to sort out as part of this tonight. But I think, it may be something that's worth talking about.
Or just
session.
communication.
Yeah,
I think it's just
more
communication.
Yeah.
Right. Another service that we offer is a walkthrough before a pre-lease walkthrough, and that would include inspectors, David's staff, members of the fire department, so that the tenant is going into it eyes wide open with respect to what tenant improvements they need to be approved to bring it up to code. So that's another way where we try to inform what the requirements are.
That's great for a tenant who has kind of a clue of how to do things right.
I think that's awesome, but I don't know how many tenants know that, right? So, I mean, just to get this out, just so it's communicated, I mean, because the rumors that I hear about doing business in Winnetka don't sound like doing business in Winnetka as I understand it. So I feel like communicate. If we're making changes, we need to communicate, and it's an opportunity to talk about all the good things that we have going on. I have one last little thing. So it looks like fast food is an approved use, and I hope I didn't read that wrong, but it seemed like it was. And I remember, since I grew up here, going through the McDonald's, coming to town, and it's the most beautiful McDonald's except for the one downtown. But I just, I'm uncomfortable if fast food can just go in without being a permitted use. Maybe I misread it, though.
Well, a fast food restaurant would be a special use.
Okay,
A fast casual restaurant would be a permitted use.
okay, so both of them require some review.
No.
A fast casual would not.
Oh, okay, oh, permitted, okay.
That would be like Panera's. Is-
Yeah.
A fast casual, by our definition, is a place where food is offered for sale and people, and that it's brought to your table. You pick it up at a counter, and then it's brought to your table. A fast food restaurant would be predominantly you go to the counter and you take it to your table.
Okay,
According to our definition, it is. We were just talking here that, so something like Panera would be considered fast food. Because
Serve you.
they don't serve you.
And
they don't
under
serve
the
you. Well,
current
sometimes they
defi-
do, because they give you the little bleeper, and then they come and find you.
Many do.
But they're serving you at the counter, right?
No, they come to your table, they come to your
Oh,
table.
do they?
Yeah,
You order at the counter, and they're bringing
Yeah, I
it.
usually do carry out there,
Right.
so. What about Culver's? What would they be? Because they bring it to your table.
they do.
they'd be fast casual.
Then we're okay.
That's what I'm trying to
As long as they do
avoid.
my fish sandwich.
With Ben Schuster, the assistant village attorney, and Brian, we've spent hours trying to come up with ways to distinguish between the two, and they're blending now. That's the issue. So,
Well, I think special use at least sends the message that we consider it, right?
fast casual would be permitted.
Yeah.
Fast food would be special use.
Okay. So let me ask a question here, guys. Are we ready to move this thing forward, or at least introduce it, and then maybe have this enforceability issue addressed a little bit more between now and the time we see a final ordinance?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, and I have a couple of minor changes, which I can then just give to David, so that's not, we don't have to
Anything
talk about it.
substantive, Penny, or just wordsmithing, or?
It's wordsmithing.
Sure, Bob.
On the co-working space, and Chris, you know this better than I do, but, so my understanding of co-working space is sort of, you don't have a permanent office
Right.
in this co-working space. So you don't really establish your business in this co-working space. But then I was reading the definition, co-working space may include fabrication of tools or equipment using three-dimensional printer, prototype design, editing, similar equipment. It sounds like when you start bringing equipment in, you're almost potentially setting up a business, which I don't think we would want that to avoid, having the conversation we're having right now in terms of permitted or special, whatever. So I just would want to make sure it's clear in the co-working space that it's almost transient work, or not transient, that's a bad word, but,
Yeah, if we
you're coming in, you're not really setting your foundation of your business in the space. And
Yeah.
It's like temporary cooperative use.
I mean, were you guys looking at stuff from California when you picked that up?
Yeah. I mean, again, this is still shared equipment. I mean, just like in a co-working space, there's going to be a copier, I was going to say a fax machine, I don't know if they have fax machines anymore, but there are still going to be a common area for some of those shared elements, and this is just saying that those elements could be part of that, as long as they don't generate noise or pollutants in excess of what would be customary found in a typical office environment.
so no one would set up ABC Corporation and just say, I'd like to rent that corner spot in this co-working space for the year.
No, I can't say that. I mean, I just was reading an article in the Tribune where they're talking about what's going to happen to co-working space if the economy goes down, because a lot of large companies have been renting out expanded amounts of space in these larger co-working spaces. I don't know if we're going to ever get one of a large co-working space here in Winnetka, but so I'm guessing it will typically be just small or individual entrepreneurs looking for a space to rent outside of their home on a month-to-month, more temporary basis. I can't say that no one would enter into it.
Well, that's more of a shared office concept than
Well,
co-working.
this is what I'm
Yeah.
getting at a little bit.
No,
Maybe it was-
co-working is really more transient, and that is the
So
correct
how do we
word for it.
define that?
It isn't meant to be a headquarters or a home office sort of an arrangement. It really is a collaborative, temporary space. the best way to think about it is that it's an alternative to
Coffee shop.
going to a noisy coffee shop and trying to get some work done there.
Maybe what scares me is the word fabrication of tools. Just
Yeah,
call
that's
it,
kind
just
of-
call it a 3D printer.
Or equipment,
And leave it
office
at
equipment.
that.
Office
So it
equipment.
doesn't seem like you're opening up an industrial shop.
Well, that's more the makerspace concept, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah, right.
Well, what do you do if someone comes in and they're a specialist in nail work, salon type thing, and they have a private clientele, and the clientele goes up to that space of theirs and they're doing their nails.
Well, it says
That
office.
wouldn't be an
It's office space.
office
Yeah,
type
it's office.
use, so it wouldn't be allowed.
But I could go to that co-working space and say, I'd like to rent that office, for the year? Could I do that?
well, that would be more shared.
But that's prohibited. Are we prohibiting that? I guess is my question on this definition.
Wait, I think in co-working, you don't have to work together with each other.
No.
No.
You can have independent,
No, co-working means.
Oh, and there are little separate offices you
Right.
can go in, but they're
Right.
not your office permanent. I mean.
well, because you might share that space, like you have it from 9 to 1, and someone has it from 2 to 5, or
Yeah.
something like that.
So it would be more like an hourly basis, right?
Well, it's a subscription.
It can, yeah, it can be anything. It can be
But-
daily, it can be monthly, it can be yearly.
But I mean, a particular desk would be, it's not yours, it's just the right to use the space,
Well, you know
correct?
what?
Depending on how much of the subscription you buy of it. It's
I just,
like your time-
I'm not familiar with the concept.
I
That's
just.
why I'm asking. I
And,
don't.
and I'm.
There's a good one at 20 West Kinsey in the city. You can go look at that one. And they have areas where they have beverages for sale, and then they have conference rooms that you can, use, or where you put your name on a list to use it. You rent it out like you're in, like if you are in a law firm and you say, I need this conference room today, it's the same.
So it would be
idea.
an hourly basis, right? I
It
mean,
can be, but you can be someone who decides that they want to be there every day, all day long, from 9 to 5. Like,
but it's not, would you have an assigned space?
yes, and everyone has an assigned space. Like, they know where they're, generally, it has,
Oh.
you know where it
Don't leave your
is.
stuff there, though.
You can leave stuff there.
Oh, really?
Well,
I mean, it
Kinsey?
depends on this.
And that gets
space.
murky.
And if it's a national company, I could go to a different city and show my card and use
Yeah.
that space.
Yeah, which is cool. I mean, you're going in and using it.
Right. I mean,
Well, let
Reading
me,
this
What's the issue?
let me enlighten us some more.
Yeah,
here,
what's the issue?
Because I recently found out, because I've got about 6,000 feet I'm trying to lease in a very desirable area that would be wonderful for co-working. And I talked to 5 or 6 different providers of this service, and they all told me that, you know what, 6,000 feet isn't enough. We need double that minimum before we'd even think of a sped, and we prefer 15 to 20. So the reality of it is we can kill ourselves on this.
not
There is one place that I know that's considering the concept here in Winnetka, but it would be a whole different animal anyway, and I think we'd have a different conversation about that. But, we could just pull it out for that matter because the reality of it is I don't think the market's going to bring it unless it's a local entrepreneur.
Right.
And then, they could just bring it along as a special use, right? I mean,
Well, if it's not listed, we'd have to amend the code to allow it as a special
Yeah,
use, but
I don't have a problem having co-working. It just seems that it shouldn't be allowed to establish a business
no,
in that co-working space. That's all I'm
Shouldn't,
getting
in a
at.
sense, become a
headquarters.
permanent or semi-permanent.
For any business. And so that would be, I just define it that way, that,
But sometimes it happens that way, because someone that's starting a business, they might work at home for a year, and like, okay, I have time to get out, I need a little more private office time, but I don't want to rent the whole office.
but if that business, John, is not a permitted business,
well, here, let's
know.
take an example of something that's been in the news, private college counselors, right? And just have fun with it, wake everyone up. So they do use co-working spaces, and their business is, quote, headquartered where their office is, because they're not meeting with kids at their home. They come to their office at whatever location it is, and they meet with them. It's their headquarters, because they're just an entrepreneur, a private person. It's not, Granger having their headquarters there. So when you talk about headquarters, I'm not sure what you mean. There are a lot of industries where it's, law, coaching, professional coaching, college counseling. psychoanalytic services, I don't know. There's so many different kinds of service providers that could be interested. I mean, I don't think therapy would, because you would want a private space, but just thinking out loud. But whatever.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though. I mean, we are saying that this is permitted in the general retail area, right? It's special use in commercial. So if someone were to come forward with an idea, they would have to come through the process, and we would have an opportunity to question them around what kind of expectations and guidelines and rules are they establishing.
For the overlay.
Right. So, I mean, I think that we can spend a lot of time defining, and we don't know where this industry is going.
Right.
I think that having it as a special use, calling it out, setting some parameters, gives us the control and the flexibility.
Should it be special use in general retail? Just permit it.
I mean, general retail is, it's off the main thoroughfares. I guess I'm less concerned about it, if it were away and off the street, in that sense.
I think we got it right, to be honest with you. David, work on the definition. I'll provide you some more information on it now that I've had a chance. I'll show you some of the agreements that are used for these spaces, and that'll probably help inform how you define it a little bit, and you guys can
Okay.
compare notes. The bottom line is this, is that I know probably 20 people, and at least probably one other person sitting at this dais, who would probably take advantage of a space like that if it were here in town.
Agree?
Yeah,
Agree.
yep.
So, all right,
Do we need
guys.
to take any action tonight?
Maybe we could introduce it and then come back with the revisions next time around and then take it from there.
Okay.
Or do you want to send it back and not even introduce it? I would really like to get
Yeah.
this off my plate,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, okay. Anybody else? Let's try this then. Can I have a motion to introduce ordinance number MC1, 2019?
So moved?
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and we'll see a revised document back the next time around. Thank goodness. Okay, where are we at here, Rob? Oh, item C. All right, item C, resolution number R28, 2019. Sorry to make you guys wait so long. 1030, 1025 and 1035 Sheridan Road, amendment to CS Lakeside consolidation, final plat for adoption. Again, Community Development Director David Schoen will review an updated plat of consolidation for this previously approved consolidation to the subject property. David.
Yes, in December of last year, the council approved the final plat for consolidating 1025 and 1035 Sheridan. Since that time, the applicant has been working with their neighbors to make some adjustments to the ingress and egress easements to the property, and then also looking at placing some additional or relocated easements for utilities as part of their work to relocate a transformer and associated electric cable. And so the previous approved plat had never been recorded, so we're just presenting an updated plat. Once the council approves it, then we'll work with the applicant to get the necessary signatures and record the plat. Any questions?
Any questions for David on this?
Nope.
A lot of cleanup. Any questions or comments from the audience on this item? Seeing none, I'll move forward. May I have a motion to adopt resolution number R28, 2019?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Myers?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn?
Yes.
Trustee Wedner? Yes. Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
Trustee Lampier?
She went to
She's
the,
out. Okay. Carries.
Motion carries. Item D, resolution number R29, 2019, approving a change order to the contract with the Progress Group for the repair of unit number 6, turbine and generator, for
You
adoption.
enjoy that first part of the conversation, so we did that for your benefit.
Water and Electric Director Brian Keys will review the developments associated with the overhaul of turbine number 6 at the electric plant. Brian, take it away.
Thank you. So the 2019 electric fund budget capital plan contains $600,000 for the inspection and overhaul of turbine number 6. On a periodic basis, the turbines at the power plant are taken out of service. There's 3 steam turbines. They're taken out of service for inspection, identification of things that are out of alignment, deteriorated parts. And then turbine number 6 was in the budget for this year. As a side note, the 2 other turbines are in the 5-year plan for years 2021 and 2023. Number 6 was manufactured in 1948 by Westinghouse Electric Company. It was last overhauled in 2007 and is one of the 5 generating units, which there's the 3 steam and 2 diesel units. This particular unit generates $264,000 of capacity credits in an agreement that extends through the year 2035 with IMEA. In December of 2018, the council approved a contract with an entity called the Progress Group to begin the overhaul project. And subsequently, the contractor has been on site and has basically taken the unit apart and identified their preliminary findings. The contract that was awarded in December was an amount not to exceed $417,584, which had a base overhaul bid, bearing work, seal work, and $50,000 at the discretion of the village manager's approval for other repairs that were identified. We've spent time with the contractor making sure they had a good understanding of what this unit does for the village of Winnetka, both in the fact that we want it to be reliable and safe, but we're not looking for a museum-grade frame to turbine, complete overhaul, brand new paint, the whole 9 yards. But we want it to be reliable for our use, and we expect to get several more years of service out of it. They've identified recommendations which are attached on page 75, but there's 2 findings that I'll call specifically to your attention. First, there's 14 stages of fan blades or turbine blades in there, and they've identified that the first 3 where the steam enters the turbine, which is where the most pressure is got severe deterioration, metal thinning, and pitting. And you can actually, you don't need to be a metallurgical engineer or an engineer. If you look at page 77, you can see the deterioration of the blades. The problem with that is as those pieces come off, it goes through the other stages of the turbine. So this is only going to, repairing this is only going to end up with severe problems in the other stages. But I also would like to note that the contractor said while there's deterioration, he's not recommending the whole turbine blade set be replaced, but 3 specific blades, which is at a cost of $144,575. The most concerning finding was a shorted turn in the rotor. The rotor is a rotating piece of equipment that's spinning inside a fixed cage called the stator. And they've identified a short. It was operating functionally correct when we took it out of service. In fact, they said you could probably have 2 turns shorted and may still continue to work. But at some point in time, unplanned, it's going to fail probably rather catastrophically, taking out the entire rotor. And it's not their recommendation that this type of problem go without being addressed. The rotor is several feet long. And to basically get to the coils that have to be inspected, it's a meticulous process where they need to take the end fittings off. They'll do non-destructive testing on them to make sure there's no cracks, but then they'll start to look for the shorted turn. They've provided a cost for that time-consuming work to find that problem as $110,426. In trying to bring you some definitive answers on what that may uncover, we asked them to give us what they believe the worst-case scenario is, rather than ask you to move forward with a lot of uncertainty, and I admit there's still some uncertainty with this. They think potentially there'd be another $115,766 of cost if they have to rewind 2 coils. In my prior to tonight, Trustee Dearborn reached out to me, and on the dais was a correction to what I'd like to review on page 72 of the total cost, and he caught a mathematical error. Fortunately, it was $40,000 in my favor, so I'd like to thank you for that. So on page 72, the total cost of the rewind is presented in the packet was $763,830, but the last item, the rewind of 2 rotor coils, was incorrectly shown as $155,766. It should have been $115,766. So the total cost would be $723,830. So again, thank you, Trustee Dearborn. In respect, because again, this is not an area that we deal with repairs every day on or have a lot of experience, went back and looked at a repair that was done on the number 6 rotor, so the same unit back in 2010, and we expended $220,000, a little over $220,000 to repair the rotor, and the analysis part, the tear down, was a little over $80,000. So again, the rotor repair is priced at $226,192, and that compares very similar to the cost we had to repair it back in 2010. There is 2 remaining items of uncertainty that the contractor feels that, although low, I would want to call to your attention. When they take the end rings off the rotor, which these are kind of like big metal castings that hold it all together as it's spinning, they'll do non-destructive testing looking for metal fatigue and cracking, and that can't be done until they're physically removed. So there's the chance they will find a problem with the rotor. And the second part is if we proceed with the replacement of the fan blades, as they remove the actual blades from what they call the wheel assembly, they'll inspect that for cracking or any fatigue that could indicate additional problems would be forthcoming. Both have been characterized as not probable, but again, that's, something that we may be revisiting, coming back to you with new findings. The generating unit is in our contract with IMEA. It's at your discretion to know whether you want to continue as a generating member, but that goes through 2035. We have the unit scheduled out of service through May 1st. The contract that was with the Progress Group had penalties that if it wasn't returned by May 1st, they would be under penalty. That would require some renegotiation with them, and we also likely incur some type of penalty, and penalty is probably not the right word, reduction in capacity credits from IMEA, because these repairs will extend beyond the May 1st planned return. For June, we would, if we don't get the unit back in service by June, we'd see a reduction of $11,000, and then in July and each month thereafter would be a reduction of $22,000 of credits. I would note, besides, and I'm talking a lot about the financials, but there's 2 other pieces. The generating units, until we complete the Northfield substation improvements, which is over the next 3 years, the generation provides contingency support to an equipment failure at our substations or our tie lines. So it's Doug Williams, former village manager, always referred to it as a 3-legged stool. And you need to have at least 2 legs of the stool in the peak summer period, the generating plant being 1 leg, tie lines at ComEd, and our substation are the other 2. In 2017, although I didn't highlight this, but I think for those of you that had to go through, as I think were classified as painful rate study sessions, we did see that in the vast majority of the years, except for really on turbine overhaul years, that having these generating units earn capacity credits helps keep our wholesale rates very competitive. So it is helping that, even though it seems like there is a cost to this now, it was shown to be beneficial in the long run to our rates that we offer our residents. So moving forward, seeking your consideration, we did budget $600,000. Had it not been for the rotor repair, I would be feeling pretty good about this Jenna report and the change order. We'd be under budget. The payback period all in would be 2.7 years, and the additional funding that exceeds the budget is $123,830. Because we're early in the budget cycle, I haven't identified any specific offsets. Most of the electric fund capital is some cable transformers, so bread and butter items, and there is a fire protection project which keeps us moving toward the Northfield substation. To date, on some of the contracts that you have allowed us to move forward with, I'd say there's $24,000 of savings. In the last warrant list, we saw $16,000 in metals de-escalation on a cable order, and on the wall repair that was approved earlier in February, we were $8,100. So we have had some favorability. And at this time, I would seek your consideration of a change order in the amount of $306,246 above what you've already authorized with the Progress Group, so we can move forward with the repair, and I'd be happy to field what I'm guessing are some questions on it.
I'm a little confused, Brian, just on, are we certainly going to miss the May 1st deadline? Or is it only if we don't approve this that we miss the May 1st deadline?
Based on talking with the contractor, I feel pretty confident we're missing the May 1st deadline.
Okay, do
And
we
so we'll-
factor in that cost or that absence of credits into this, or should?
No, so those credits would show up in a different account. It wouldn't be with the vendor, so what it'll show up is an increase in our wholesale electric bill for those months. So in theory, our wholesale electric bill for June will be, which we'd get on July 15th, would be $11,000 higher.
But we didn't add that into this list of overage on the repair.
No.
Should we, question mark? I don't know.
I think from an accounting treatment, it should stay with the wholesale power bill,
Okay,
the line item in our budget for wholesale power.
okay.
But we would only, my understanding is, if we said, no, we don't want to do the rotary, leave it as is, they could probably get the thing put back together before May 1st.
But then we wouldn't be safe.
But
That's right.
that's my
That-
concern would be is I
Right.
really.
I'm saying the trade-off here is, we either go with safety and give up $11,000, or we say, no, that 11,000 is important, just put it back
Right.
together.
I'm just trying to get the totality, because my concern going forward is just looking at the budget for the other turbines that we have in the 5 years out, and so making sure that we've budgeted correctly, so that we're really dealing with the actual cost and not the hoped-for cost.
This
because-
this will definitely impact how we budget the next two.
Right,
We were definitely not planning, I was planning that we would find deterioration and things that needed to be addressed.
right.
Had we, in the absence of the rotor, and you take that out of the equation, we're actually below what we were planning on for the budget.
Right, but it's old. I mean, it's from the 1940s.
Right, so the long-term strategy on this is, we need the improvements to be made at the Northfield substation, which then provides that added contingency that we rely on these generating units to provide. In my mind, this is probably, with the way our contract is, I mean, this should take us quite a ways into the future barring unplanned events. And then we'll hopefully have more perspective on what value, if any, these have in future agreements for wholesale power.
So Brian, the concern that you had, the two events that are not probable, that once they go in and start looking at this thing and so on, do you have a wild guess if those happen to?
On the wheels, I don't know what those costs would be. On the bell ends, the casing ends, I think it was $100,000 if they're deemed unusable.
Okay, so
So basically, the way we proceed, if you give concurrence to move forward, we would release them to move forward with taking the rotor apart, do the non-destructive testing, and move forward with the the blade component of it. And if they find a problem and we put the brakes on it, evaluate it, and come back and say, okay, here's the current information we have.
yeah, that's the only negative.
There's unfortunately, until they take it
Right,
apart.
understood.
So we had a teleconference with them. Until we give them we're willing to expend some funds to tear it apart, we're not going to be able to get to the next level of detail. So that's the catch we're in.
Well, as a, from a pure business standpoint, I mean, any project, any investment you made with a less than 3-year payback period, you'd probably do it. I mean, so this seems something.
And again, not being a major electrical engineer, what does a new unit cost, completely new?
Well, I was posed that question by trustee Dearborn as well.
I'm sure it's quite high.
We had a nice
I
conversation.
went to the Department of Energy, had put out a fact sheet from using some 2015 data, and it's not made, as like a proxy, it was a combined cycle for both heat and power. And for the megawatt output that this unit provides, based on the data sheet they had, it would be around 3.75 million. That's just for the turbine, that's not for the boilers or the steam assembly, so this was the turbine and the installation they had at basically around $682 a kilowatt.
Okay, thanks.
I might add one thing too, is according to what your math in here, that our current reserve in the electric fund exceeds our minimum desired reserve by a few $100,000, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. I apologize for passing over that. So one of the financial metrics that you review when you have me in front of you for the budget is the fund balance. So with the finance team, what was in the budget book for this year is we look at closing out this December of 19 at $5.8 million, and the 4-month operating requirement is 5.2 million. So we are above what we're projected for the fund balance for the year with the drawdown.
So you got 600 grand. and-
600.
And
And I've got 20, so far I've had some 24,000 of savings in some of the capital.
the
So,
good thing about managing the finances conservatively is we have a significant war chest to take care of hiccups like this when they do arise, so, which is helpful. It's not like we're going to go back and jack up rates because we had to do this. I mean, it really is a matter of, we've accumulated enough rainy day money to solve this, even if you don't have any more good buys for the year, and not compromise the overall position.
correct, and then like I said, there's some other potential savings coming in cable and transformers on the capital, depending on what the requirements are for new business this year. We bought most of the reinforcement cable that we need for cable replacements already been budgeted. That's the 16,000 in metals de-escalation I mentioned.
So, all right, I'd like to ask if anybody in the audience has any comments or questions on this item? I don't see any. You guys, come on up and ask a question, okay? About turbine generators or fan blades or bell housing hubs or whatever, so.
I'm going to say that was done one other time to me, and I was actually got stumped, so I get nervous when you do that.
So, okay. I'll bring it back up here. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions?
Yeah, I just would like to point out, I mean, we talk about this from the dollars and cents standpoint, which of course is really important, and the good news is we've been able to make good decisions just based on the dollars and cents. But the other thing that we get that we don't quantify in terms of a monetary amount is the reliability that we have in our own system, and, that's pretty difficult to quantify, but on those, our other communities are a lot more vulnerable, and we've been able to get up and back online because we have this power generating capacity. So I'd just like to remind people of that, lest we forget. So thanks.
Yeah, could you ever imagine having this discourse with a representative from Commonwealth Edison?
Yeah, see you later, alligator.
Okay. May I have a motion to adopt resolution number R28, 2019?
Second?
Oh, wait a minute. Cancel that. May I have a resolution to, no, it's a resolution number R29, 2019. I don't have my glasses. I'm really sorry. Approving a change order with the Progress Group for the repair of Unit 6 turbine and generator.
Second?
Roll call vote. Thank you, Peter.
Trustee Wedner. Yes. Trustee Dearborn.
Yes.
Trustee Myers.
Yes.
Trustee Lampier. Trustee Swerve.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Might as well stay there, Brian. Resolution number R31, 2019, rejecting bids, waiving bidding, and awarding a contract for the Northfield Load Center Fire Protection Design Build. This is up for adoption. Water and Electric Director Brian Keys is here to review the recommended bid award for a fire protection project at the Northfield Load Center. Brian?
Thank you. So, again, Giovanni, Assistant Director of Water and Electric, prepared this. Since I was going to have the pleasure of talking about the turbine, he decided to abdicate to me tonight on his item. So this is one of the capital projects, again, in preparing for the second substation transformer in Northfield, is to improve the fire protection of the substation. So there's $180,000 in the 2019 electric fund capital plan. This is one piece of the projects that are being done to modify the building and the transformer yard to better protect the substation from a hazard of a fire. What's proposed in here is a design build scope. We went out to bid similar to what was done previously at our plant load center down at the power plant. That's the separate brick building that's at the corner as you come down the bottom of the hill. Bidders were asked to be pre-qualified, and we're looking for a clean agent system. So this is where, when the system's activated, instead of a sprinkler system with water that conducts electricity, is a gas is used to snuff out the fire. Doesn't have a residue. It's used in data centers and substations for that particular reason. We received 2 bids, and after looking at the bids, determined it was not in our favor, the village's favor from a pricing perspective, to move forward. And so we elected to or recommending that you waive or reject those bid and waive the bidding, we went forward with negotiating with one of the two bidders, the ore company, and then we've landed on a contracted amount of $59,195. Because that was done where we rejected the bids, or recommending that you reject the bids, and we went into negotiations, you would also need to waive the bidding process to accept this contract. As a reference point, the other bid that was received and that we didn't feel was advantageous was over $100,000. So this was, the intent here was to move into a negotiation to get the design build scope that we want at, we thought, a very favorable price. The due diligence, we haven't used this company before, but the references that the assistant director checked were very favorable. And ultimately, this will be run through Chief Burkowski's fire safety consultant for his approval. They'll turn in design drawings, they get approved, so we know we're going to get a product that's approved. Would seek your approval to move forward with this by considering adoption of Resolution R31, 2019, and I'd be happy to field questions on this item.
Any questions for Brian?
So that came in on a $180,000 budget, 59,000?
Well, there's a couple other pieces, so I'm not declaring victory yet. So there's some brickwork where we're redoing some vents. We need to change some HVAC work, and we're looking at getting the firewall between the transformers designed this year. So that's why I did not offer that up as saying it was an offset to my previous agenda report. So that's kind of some of the scope of work that was intended with the building modifications in the transformer yard for fire protection.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Any questions or comments from the audience? Come on, fire protection's a lot easier than turbines. I guess not. All right, we'll bring it back up. Any final thoughts? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adopt resolution number R31, 2019?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Lampier? Yes. Trustee Myers?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn? Yes. Trustee Wedner?
Yep.
Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Okay. Old business, none. New business, none. Appointments tonight, none. I got to know, what are you guys doing here?
We're from Loyola, we're taking an AP poli-sci class for a project we're required to attend the village hall meeting. Can we take a picture with someone?
You have a weird idea of
Yeah.
fun.
No better way to spend a Tuesday evening.
It had to be some villages that had like cookies and donuts or something.
Well, you know what the reality of it is you're looking at, it's 6 government geeks up here, so, I mean, that's kind of what happens. This is what happens when you get old and you haven't got anything better to do with your evening, so.
Yeah.
So it would be. Okay, we'll get you out of here now. Item number 12, closed session. May I have a motion to go into closed session to discuss collective bargaining pursuant to Section 3C2 of the Illinois Open Meeting Act?
2C2.
2C2 of the Illinois Open
Motion
Meeting
from
Act.
Trustee
Second.
Wedner. Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Wedner?
Yes.
Trustee Myers?
Yes.
Trustee Lampier? Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn? Yes.
The council meeting will adjourn immediately after the closed session. Thank you.
There you go.